Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are joining us today. I'm Rachel Brown, and I serve as the Senior Advisor for Conservation and Strategic Partnerships here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. On behalf of NAP and all of my colleagues here, I'd like to welcome you to this session, and thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us and learn more about the work that Indigenous communities are doing across Alaska. Prior to joining NAP, I spent 13 years at the Department of Interior, where I had the pleasure of working with tribes across Alaska. And through that work, I learned so much about the amazing work that tribal communities are doing and some of the unique challenges that those communities face. In fact, I was just in Southeast Alaska last week and had the opportunity to visit directly with communities and tribal leaders and see some of the work that tribes are doing on the ground to support not only tribal citizens, but the communities as a whole. I'm excited for you all to hear from our wonderful speakers today. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna welcome NAP's Education and Resources Facilitator, Shandine Vanderveer, who will serve as our MES moderator today. Shandine?
Yeah, Rachel, thank you so much for that introduction. Shandine Vanderveer Yinisha, Bilagana Nishlin, Touch Eatme Bushichin, Bilagana Dashich, Inonjani Dashinala. My name is Shandine Vanderveer. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and I am joining you all here today from Lenape-Hoking, otherwise known as New York City, the traditional lands of the Canarsie and Lenape peoples. I am very honored to serve as Education Resource Facilitator for Native Americans in Philanthropy, and very honored to welcome you all to this member education session, Alaska Natives 101. A big ahihet ago for Rachel. Thank you again for welcoming us into this space and grounding us in the importance of really understanding the on-the-grounds initiatives that are happening in Alaskan Native communities. It's a pleasure to have Senior Advisor for Conservation and Strategic Partnerships share more about her unique experience, and I hope that you all get a chance to delve deeper into the work that she continues to move forward as part of Native Americans in Philanthropy's key initiatives that are focused on Native-led conservation, land restoration, as well as economic development. Rachel again once more. Our entire team here continues to carry forward an incredible sense of renewed community, of purpose, and momentum that was sparked by our recent annual conference in Riverside, California last month. And we are very excited to share that our next gathering will be held in Anchorage, Alaska. We look forward to welcoming our broad community of leaders, practitioners, advocates, as well as learners working at the intersection of philanthropy, of Native advocacy, and tribal sovereignty. So in that spirit, we are honored to uplift today's conversation as a critical entry point for those seeking to build more meaningful, respectful, and lasting relationships with our Alaskan Native relatives. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to address that Alaska is home to an extraordinarily diverse Indigenous Native population. They include over 220 of the 570 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And each of these tribal nations maintains its own governance structures, their own cultural traditions, and community practices that have been rooted in generations of stewardship, of resilience, and of being adaptable. So while Alaska Native communities represent widely diverse cultures, languages, art forms, histories, and ways of life, many also share foundational values that have guided their peoples for millennia. Across Alaska, there are 11 distinct cultural regions that are often identified geographically, again, each reflecting unique relationships to water, to land, to community, as well as identity. So it is important to address that for thousands of years, Alaskan Native peoples have lived throughout the vast lands and waters that later became the 49th state. Traditional lifeways that are grounded in subsistence, which is a traditional sustainable lifestyle of hunting, gathering, fishing, and stewarding natural resources, have enabled these communities to thrive in some of the world's most challenging environments. So it's important to address that subsistence is not simply an economic activity. It is truly a way of life that is deeply connected to cultural continuity, community responsibility, and spiritual practice across generations. Today, many Alaska Native communities continue to rely on fish, wildlife, and wild resources for food security, for transportation, clothing, handicrafts, trade, ceremony, just as many of our ancestors did for countless generations. And it is Alaska's natural abundance that remains central to both daily life and community well-being. Understanding the role of subsistence is essential to understanding Alaska Native cultures because it not only represents survival, but the balance and enduring relationships between people, place, and a responsibility for future generations. So as we begin today's discussion, it is important to also recognize some key historical and legal frameworks that shape contemporary Alaska Native governance and advocacy. One of the most significant that I'd like to highlight in this space is the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971, which you may commonly hear referred to as ANCSA. Through ANCSA, Alaska Native corporations, or ANCs, were established as for-profit corporations that were incorporated under Alaska state law. And it is critical to understand that Alaska tribal nations and Alaska Native corporations are distinct entities with different purposes and authorities. Tribal nations are sovereign governments with inherent rights and responsibilities that predate the formation of the U.S. ANCs, by contrast, are state-chartered corporate entities created through federal legislation to help manage land and economic access. The existence of ANCs does not diminish or replace tribal sovereignty, nor does ANCSA negate the inherent rights and tribal government-to-government status of Alaskan tribes. In today's conversation, we hope to offer an opportunity to deepen our collective understanding of these distinctions and many other nuances, while centering the voices, experiences, and leadership of Alaskan Native peoples themselves. So as Native Americans in Philanthropy prepares to gather in Alaska for our next conference, we do hope that this discussion encourages all of us to approach this work with humility, with curiosity, respect, and as always, a commitment to building authentic relationships that are grounded in reciprocity and accountability. So to start off our introductions, it is my pleasure to also welcome our junior moderator for this member education session. As Native Americans in Philanthropy continues to uplift our Native youth in more decision-making spaces, we welcome these emerging leaders pooled from our Native Youth Grantmakers third cohort to help guide our collective focus to better support our future generations from their own lived experiences, as well as their dedication to protecting our strong communities. So as we find new ways to engage these youth, we also encourage you to implement your own methods of uplifting their perspectives and voices in real and sustainable ways. So I would like now to give it over to our junior moderator and Native Youth Grantmaker and give Maddie the opportunity to welcome you all in their own words.
Yep. Nyawis kinang skugwego ayagaganos na gaison onondowaka na gaina dego johesta dogo. Greetings. I hope you guys are all well, and thank you to Nap, Rachel, and Shondine for this amazing opportunity. My English name is Madison Brown, and my given name Ayagaganos translates to beautifully she says. I'm Onondowaka, or more notably known as Seneca, from the Allegheny Territory, located in the southern tier of Western New York, a very rural part of New York and Haudenosaunee country, but with a beautiful river that flows through it. It's really great to mention that our lands are named after that beautiful river, and it's actually called Beautiful River in our language. It's a beautiful thing. But I grew up in a household of leadership and became very involved at a young age, starting with my local youth council and grassroots organizing. I was elected back in 2022 to the National Congress of American Indians Youth Commission, where I served over 3 years with the organization, fostering a very strong sense of youth leadership, as well as an understanding of tribal governance and intergovernmental coordination. In 2024, I was appointed to the Seneca Nation 1365 Resettlement Committee, a critical role tasked with developing a comprehensive plan for the Seneca Nation's resettlement within the Kinzua Dam area, lands from which we were forcibly removed from in 1965. This appointment truthfully highlighted my dedication to historical justice, tribal sovereignty, and intergenerational planning. Beyond my more formal roles, I actively engage in community service and environmental stewardship, advocating for our lands and our waters. I'm an avid outdoors woman and always trying to find inspiration and connections to the quote-unquote teachings in the soil through activities such as fishing, hunting, and gathering. I'm grateful to be here and in space with you all. And let's dive in. AlexAnna and Jamie are both incredible matriarchs with experience leading across their communities, so I will let them share more about what perspectives they're bringing to today's conversation. Y'all, as you're called, please introduce yourself and your affiliations however you feel comfortable.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I would like to start off our introductions by calling AlexAnna to the stage. AlexAnna, if you'd like to introduce yourself however you feel comfortable. Oh, your microphone is muted.
Bitsakan redamkin, Royana Dailuchi, Ababi Gainauwa, Iriarachmiunga, Yupiuwa Ungangaslu. I'm AlexAnna. I belong to the place where Lake Iliamna is swallowed by the Igiugig River, which flows into Bristol Bay, Alaska, which is in the southwest region. I represent Igiugig Village Council. Iriarach is named by the way of swallowing. We live on Alaska's largest lake, Lake Iliamna, which has incredible diversity and the world's largest wild sockeye salmon run. Our tribe is about 70 people. Our Bristol Bay region is home to 3 major languages, Alutiiq, Inupiaq, and Dinaina, and we're about the size of the state of Ohio, just for context. And I'm a mother, a grandmother, an auntie, love living out in our community where I was raised. And I also hail as a partner from Alaska Venture Fund, which is a philanthropic partner that supports sustainable and justice solutions for Alaska and beyond. And I'm excited to bring these perspectives and share with you all today. Royana, for having me.
Yeah, for joining us, AlexAnna. You bring such a beautiful voice from your communities. I know we've been partners for a long time, so I appreciate you donating even much more of your time today. Up next, I would like to have Jamie introduce herself. Jamie, if you'd like to take a few moments, share a little bit about your experience and what perspective you're bringing to the table today.
Ganesh Chish, Squate Yuhak to Asak, Yek Nahatsati, Lukakari Ayahat, Kagwantan Yadi, Wishkitan Dutchkan, Yeth Hit. My Tlingit name is Squate. My English name is Jamie Gomez. I'm born and raised here in Southeast Alaska in Juneau. I am a member of the Tlingit clan, which is referred to as Raven Sockeye here in the Tlingit Haida. I am a child of the Kagwantan, the Wolf Clan, and a grandchild of the Wishkitan, the Shark. And I come from the Raven House. And we would spend our, growing up, we'd spend our summers out at fish camp. We were very fortunate to be able to do that in our culture camp. And then as I grew older, I got a job working with the National Congress of American Indians. I worked there for 23 years. And then I went over to work for the National Indian Health Board for a few years until I got the opportunity to come home and work for my tribe. And been very fortunate to work with the Tlingit Haida, where I'm a tribal citizen. And and I help run the foundation for the tribe now, which is a very exciting and new venture for us. Thank you.
Yeah, Jamie. I always like people who join these panels having had experience with both levels of supporting Indigenous communities, both on a national, international scale, and then right back into the grassroots area. So I appreciate you joining us, Jamie. And our third and final panelist, Roy. Roy, if you would like to take a few moments to share a little bit about where you're coming from and what experiences you're bringing with you today.
All right. Uvanga Apagruk Agloinga, Nachagwimiunga, Inupiaq. I am an Inupiaq from White Mountain, which is Nachivik, the place to look out for animals to hunt. I have been working at First Alaskans Institute for a little over 2 years. Before that, I was a program officer cultivating national funders for the Rasmussen Foundation for about 8.5 years in Anchorage throughout Alaska. My English name is Roy Agloinga. My Inupiaq name is Apagruk, and I'm so happy to join you today.
Thank you so much for offering a little bit of your time to dive into this introductory conversation. I am honored to be sharing this space with you all here today, as well as many of our community members. To start off our conversation, I'd like to hear a little bit about your personal experiences living in Alaska with your communities, and really trying to, again, establish these meaningful relationships with those who may never have had in-person interactions with your communities, with your lands. So I'm opening today's conversation with the question, what is your personal favorite way to introduce non-Alaskan natives to your community? And AlexAnna, I'll offer that to you first.
Well, Anna, this is the easy way to answer the question. My favorite way is actually to just bring visitors out to the village. You know, when you talk about these 229 villages we have scattered across Alaska, it's really hard to figure out how to get there. What are these communities? How do you find out how you even visit them? And I really believe the community and the lands really speak for themselves far better than any presentation or pitch I could do. And so I really love to bring people out to have that authentic village life experience, so they understand why we're living out there.
Thank you, AlexAnna. What a beautiful way to put it. The lands speak for themselves. I saw both Jamie and Roy nodding along to your answer. Jamie, does that resonate with you? Do you have a different personal favorite way of introducing non-natives to your community?
It does resonate. I think bringing people out makes a difference. And actually, when you were sharing that, AlexAnna, one of the examples that popped up in my head was, I think it was the last administration, we had the Secretary of Transportation coming out to visit Alaska, and they were trying to get to one of our remote villages in Southeast, and the weather was bad, right? And as it happens in Alaska, so they couldn't get on the plane, the small plane, to get to the community, and they had to take the ferry, which is one of the ways that we're able to reach some of our communities that are landlocked. You can only get to by boat or plane, and we often have to advocate for the use of our ferry and keeping funding there, because that is such a lifeline to our people. So that is a very good example. The other one I like to think about is just sharing our own personal stories, right? We all have unique experiences. Our families have unique experiences. For example, my family, we have, my great-grandmother had 15 children. Of the 15, 13 were girls, or 12 were girls, 1 was a boy, and 13 made it to adulthood. And so as a matrilineal society, there's, a lot of women running our family, helping to preserve our clan, and just the stories of the family and the endurance and the hard work that they did to continue to keep our family strong and our language and our culture strong is a really amazing way that I like to share with others.
Thank you for sharing that, Jamie. Roy, I saw a lot of head nods from you as well. Is it bringing people directly into the community, making them face the hurdles of transportation? Is it something different?
Yeah, I've had such great opportunity to bring people home. When I was working at Rasmussen Foundation, every year we brought about 10 to 15 people every year to remote parts of Alaska just to look at the challenges that we have in each one of our communities. One of those times I was able to bring people to Nome and then to Shishmaref and really have these amazing conversations with leaders and within the Nome area, but also when we went to Shishmaref to meet with the tribe, the Native Corporation, and the health organization to really talk about the kind of challenges people had in that particular community, and many of those, of course, resonate throughout Alaska. Those visits resulted in, like in one instance, $20 million for the community, which is amazing. Bringing funders to these communities really teaches them that the need is immediate and it's huge. at a personal level, I love bringing people to my village because, we still fish and we put away salmon during the summertime. My family is getting our camp ready right now. And I brought so many friends of mine from home, to home from, leaving Anchorage or people that I meet here. And it's such an incredible way to get people familiar with a part of Alaska that they would never see otherwise.
Thank you, Roy. I cannot imagine the honor of being able to, see a fish camp, built up, taken down, used throughout the summertime. So I appreciate you sharing that experience with our community. When we started this conversation, right at the top, we made an explicit mention of how diverse all of the communities are in Alaska. And I really want to hone in on that point. Again, to AlexAnna's point, 229, which is almost a majority of all of the federally recognized tribes within the US, spread out across the state. I'm interested in hearing a little bit about some immediate recommendations for how allies should be engaging with this diversity of cultures, languages, and governance systems that exist across Alaska Native communities. Roy, since we're continuing our conversation, I'll hand it off to you.
I think that understanding the values of each of our regions and of our communities is really critical. We are all working from the basis of our traditional values. Most of us who work in the sector understand them well and try really hard to put those values into action. But also we do a lot to complement one another from region to region to make sure that visitors to my region understand that this is not the only part of Alaska, that we're not all Inupiaq, that there are so many different kinds of people and who live in such different ways and have really different practices for subsistence and food gathering. I think about all the incredible work that's happening in Southeast Alaska around conservation, and there's nothing like it, and nothing like the work that's happening there around building local economy, like through Spruce Root, this wonderful organization. But also, AlexAnna's work in Igiugig, the nation building that she's been doing there, which is such an incredible example of really creating an infrastructure and based with identity and culture. Those two really go hand in hand. So I think making sure that people understand that we have common values, but also each region has such a very different connection to the land, a very different connection to infrastructure, and really different needs. Like, in Barrow, the needs there are incredibly different around climate change than they are in my community. My community's on a river, so we don't have the same issue with flooding that other communities that are right on the coast have, for instance.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Roy. One of our commonly used adages within our own staff is when you meet and get to know one tribe, you know one tribe, and it sounds like that is the same sentiment up in Alaska. AlexAnna, since Roy mentioned your work specifically, do you have any different best practices, any ones that you'd like to reiterate that Roy already shared?
I would like to add that, based off of what Jamie added too with families, that even within the families, there's high diversity, and to really treat the diversity in Alaska as our strength. A lot of times organizations and entities pull back because, it's too complex. It's too hard to understand, rural Alaska. But it's easy. Get out to ground zero. And then follow, my main message is to honor that government to government relationship. And when people say, well, what does that mean? Or what does that look like? Pretend you're going to visit the governor of Texas. Pretend you're going to visit the president of the United States. It's of that caliber. Treat that tribal government with that level of respect as that nation to nation responsibility that each of our tribal governments have to our community. And that's what I start with. There's a lot of organizations and there's a lot of noise up in Alaska, but fundamentally, if we just center that government to government relationship and also treat that with the abundance mindset of look at all this diversity, I would just echo that. And this really comes from proven, like we treat Igiugig as a living nationhood building lab. I was a young student in school, starving to learn my native language. And at that time, all of our elders were first language speakers. And so we were told, well, how could we honor, your Inupiaq language when there are 3 major languages and it wouldn't be fair? And so I thought, well, let's come home and build that language program for them to show them that 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. We're stronger with all of them. And so we were able to model building that first for our own village, then for all the tribes around Lake Iliamna and 2 major language groups, then for all 31 tribes of Bristol Bay and all 3 language programs, and what strength there is when you get all of region support for language revitalization, honoring that diversity. So it's possible.
That abundance mindset is such a beautiful point. Again, AlexAnna, to view it as Alaska's strength, that there are so many different variations of community, truly. Jamie, would you like to add anything? Would you like to reiterate anything?
Yeah, I mean, both are really great points. And we talked earlier about getting people out and visiting, and that's how that is important. When you're out there visiting, really just listen. Right? Spend some time and listen and see what the need is, and then join with good intentions. And as was mentioned, supporting the tribal sovereignty there, and do it in a good heart, in a good way, and know it's going to take time. Right? You don't just go up and meet and think that we're going to have this instant connection. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it takes time, and sometimes the work together takes time, and recognize that. So be open about what progress looks like and talk about that, and find lessons learned when things get stalled. And, when we're talking about the connection of the land, that has a huge impact on some of our progress, and it's out of our control. So we saw, recently with the weather and the devastation that what happened in Western Alaska, right? That impacts the community and the work that's being done there. And when you look at other, around the state, some places have to look at when the river freezes up to be able to bring supplies over to their community. And that is not always on the calendar that you're looking at, your fiscal calendar, right? It may be when the river freezes up, or that sometimes the fish run, right? So recently the ooligan were running in Southeast Alaska. Work stops, people go and get their ooligan, because that is part of our subsistence life, and you have to make space for that and recognize it. And that happens all over the state. If we're talking about we rely on our subsistence and we rely on the land, then you have to make space for us to be able to stop and be able to do those things.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. I know in a couple of our previous conversations when we were prepping for this panel, even for myself, having never been to Alaska, hearing about that daily recognition of the influence of the land was really interesting. I'd like to continue our conversation specifically with that relationship to land and having it be a part of daily life for those within our community who are joining us today and are unfamiliar with the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, or ANCSA, which we touched on a little bit at the beginning of this conversation. I'm interested to hear from each of you what you think are the key points that are most important for understanding its long-term impacts, again, on this relationship that Alaska Native communities have with land. I do open that to the floor if anyone would like to start off our conversation.
Well, I can just chime in with the part that I have the biggest hardship with the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which was passed in 1971. And I'm not the expert, but a lot of people understand that it created these regional corporate for-profit state chartered corporations. So therein lies the number one fundamental problem is that putting the land base into state chartered corporations instead of centering it with tribal sovereignty. And then secondly, it extinguished Aboriginal claims to land and hunting and fishing rights, and all of the struggles that you see with our subsistence way of life and all this that we hold dear to our and why we're living out there. That those battles are still being there's so many gray areas and over institutionalized, over regulated, criminalized for hunting, for trying to live our way of life based off of that. And I'll add one more point, because we're now in 2026 and there are, it's a blanket legislation for the whole state. But I feel like it violated federal Indian law in that the people, especially in my community that were Inupiaq first language speakers, did not even understand what the word corporation inherently meant. So there was an education on what was being passed. And I would argue that people didn't, in our small remote communities, weren't actively participating in this model. And then it kind of unilaterally settled everything. And it's making it, to me, like increased distrust for legislation and increased distrust for the whole process. And as we look for legislative solutions to some of the archaic laws for the state or how we were settled, that remains an issue because people have such distrust for the process. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, AlexAnna. It is really critical to understand that, again, on a daily level, Alaskan Native communities are finding ways to live with this, incredibly powerful legislation that has changed your traditional relationship to land. Jamie, Roy, I offer it to you if you feel like there are different key points that you'd like to highlight with ANCSA in particular. Again, if you would like to reiterate anything that AlexAnna has said, I welcome it.
Yeah, I feel them much the way that AlexAnna had expressed, and it's been a frustration much of my life. But I also understand that the tremendous pressure that our leaders were in during the time of the legislation, there was no way that the state would have supported tribes. There was no way the legislation would have moved forward if it was for reservations or tribally held land. And there was also no other way to really protect our land. I mean, we would have lost everything if it wasn't for ANCSA. The sense of hatred toward Native people from the non-Native community, the power brokers in the non-Native community who wanted the pipeline to be built, was so strong. I've been reviewing like these letters of about the fact that people felt like Natives shouldn't control anything, that they don't have any right to this land. I mean, it's amazing in my mind that we got anything. Saying that, I think that we have an opportunity to change how this works, and I think that the nation building model that AlexAnna is using is a really good way to look at how do you modify this so that it works for our tribes and for our people. The tribal council, the whole idea of a tribal council that we have right now is also a very colonized perspective. It's not, I mean, we never had tribal councils like this when, before colonization. So trying to find a model that works with landholding, with economy building, with nation building, identity, and building infrastructure is incredibly challenging. And the only way that we're going to do it is if we're unified. We have to find a way to bring all these different voices to the table. And right now, unfortunately, Alaska Native, the community is really strongly divided amongst people who are very pro-extraction versus those who are pro-conservation. So finding ways to pull people together so that we continue having these really important conversations about how to move forward with building economy, but also how to protect and conserve our land it's so important. and probably one of the most difficult things we have in front of us.
And in culturally responsive ways, ones that honor our traditional ways of life, as you were saying at the beginning. Absolutely. AlexAnna, I know that you had some additional thoughts that you wanted to offer.
Yes, I'm so glad Roy spoke, because I want to hone in on that unified approach. So there is a solution with the complexity of Alaska, and it does mean that you have to put in the extra effort. So I do serve as the president of the federally recognized tribe in our village, and as the vice president of the landowning Native Corporation, which has stewardship responsibility over 66,000 acres, which surround that mouth of the Igiugig, 81 miles of salmon spawning streams. And so what we have done very unique to kind of address that, even tribal governments are a little bit of a colonial tool at this point. The way that they've been, our cookie cutter BIA constitutions. So what we're doing now is we're looking at strengthening our tribal government constitutions, but we've been living with 20-year community strategic plans. And the recent community strategic plan in my region was adopted in 2025, and it was adopted by both the Native Corporation and the tribe. So I'm starting to see more like trilateral, like adoptions of MOAs or MOUs, so that people can work together. But I really recommend adopting like a joint vision in local communities. And in that unification in my community, we have a 5-prong approach to total land back, like a land consolidation that is a best case scenario for both the landowning Native Corporation, conservation, economic development, tribal governance. And so the model really is, we have to collaborate, we have to find a path through together, all voices in the room, and it is really possible. And so that's one thing that I am proving out in our village, so that it can be inspiration for the whole state. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, that, this isn't going to be possible because look at how many entities you need to get to in agreement, but it is possible. So that's, this is part of the work.
Yeah, the solution is there, but the realism has to set in for it to be possible. Yeah. Jamie, I offer to you, if there are any specific points that you've experienced in a daily life or have just seen working in your different areas that you would like to highlight that ANCSA has influenced in the long term.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say how much I appreciate being here with AlexAnna and Roy, because I'm learning a lot. I'm taking notes because I'm like, oh, this is great. And, like they both shared, it is a complex structure. These are colonized structures that we're working on. And I think the thing that I want to just kind of reiterate that we've shared earlier is that we still have very active clans as well, right? And we have this very traditional structure too, still intact in many of our communities. And so as AlexAnna shared, she serves in these different roles. And, like many of us, I'm a shareholder, I'm a tribal citizen for our tribal government. I'm also very active in our clan. So, all of these entities are serving and supporting the individual and the community. And so finding ways to bring those together to support all of us and not divide us, right? Because we don't have, our numbers, our population is smaller than in other places. We have to work together. We can't be in the divided situation.
I appreciate each of you for really honing in on what the specific takeaways, again, those who may not be as familiar with ANCSA's long-lasting influences, really honing in on what they need to understand when engaging in relationship building with modern Alaskan Native communities. I really appreciate that you all have explicitly stressed a need for really acting with humility and with curiosity. I think that's in a large part, the most important aspect of building relationships across Native communities. And I am very excited for this next portion of the conversation, which I would like to bring back our Native Youth Grantmaker to really hone in on how those specific relationship building aspects can be used with building relationships with our Native youth. True. So Maddie, take it away.
Yeah, like mentioned, I come from a very small rural community within Haudenosaunee country, and some of the best, programs, organizing efforts are, in practice with the seven generations. So from my understanding, I understand that the seven generations or intergenerational work best works in practice. Can one of you guys share an example of a project where intergenerational perspective fundamentally shifted the direction of your community organizing and or building strategy?
Maybe I can start with that. At First Alaskans Institute, we run the Youth and Elders Conference every year. We have about 3,000 people that join us in the room here in Anchorage, and then we have about 10,000 people online, maybe a little bit more. And I have been so impressed. I've only, been on the inside of that conference over the last couple of years. But it is impressive to see the variety of sessions and how all regions are represented at this conference, and how the wisdom and the knowledge that elders are giving to youth, that our community leaders are providing in those sessions, really move our youth to participating at a more active level in their community, but also really looking at some of these statewide issues, all the issues that we're dealing with, and how to put those into practice by, right now we have a resolutions process, but a lot of youth, go back to their communities, and if they can activate some of those issues at the community level, whether it's about, language preservation or learning how to live off the land and cut and process seals and fish and deer, or how to create policy and look at the impact of federal and state policy on really changing the lives for people in our community. But also, funding is such an important thing, and I think that the lack of information about the impact of funders is one that is challenging for our elders and youth to grasp. And yet, we have a lot of opportunity to fund programs across Alaska that really make a difference. And our conference is one of those programs. We also have a fellowship program, summer intern program, where we use a lot of elder mentors and take a cohort of young people through work experience across Alaska. So,
thank you, Roy. I honestly, that seems like something we need to implement here back in Haudenosaunee country. I would like to offer it to AlexAnna or Jamie to share an experience.
Yes, sure. Well, Roy works for First Alaskans Institute, which to me is a premier place to work as a young person and really interns. And Oyana, for all the good work putting on that Elders and Youth Conference, just hearing him speak reminded me there are long-term positive impacts of that ANCSA legislation, which is that we gather once a year as the Alaska Federation of Natives. It's the greatest time to go for Arts Bazaar. The Elders and Youth Conference has just really taken off, and that's something that I attended as a young girl in high school myself, and they had like a youth leadership track. And so I would say that there are great opportunities for getting into these leadership opportunities for youth. And I want to emphasize that for Igiugig Village, we were hit by the 1919 pandemic. We had 3 survivors. So when I was growing up, our village only had 35 people. We have 70 today. But really thinking about Alaska is one of the only states that has a law where you need 10 students in order to keep your public school open. So our village has always grappled with how are we going to keep our school open? And to really our community decided to really center on education, to focus on keeping that school open for our youth. Our elders actually gave up their way out on the land they sacrificed that because they knew how important it was to open our own school to keep our youth at home instead of sending them off to a boarding school. So the initial sacrifice really happened then. What we did, because we needed to keep our youth at home and they were not staying at home. So they did community planning in 2001 that the entire focus of the question was, what does our village need to be a place our young people will want to remain? And this story really is for you, Madison, because there was a girl there who was 6 years old, and all generations are welcome to our community planning, and the nonverbal or the young ones were allowed to just draw a picture. What does the village need to look like? Fast forward 20 years later, I pulled that strategic plan and the drawings that the kids drew, and the local foods program was identified out of that 2001 plan, and food sovereignty and food security. And so we saw our climate shifting, and we built a greenhouse and all these other things. Well, we built an apple orchard. They grafted apples specifically for our climate, and we planted them out in our community. And when I pulled the picture that young girl drew, she drew an apple orchard next to a berry farm. And that's exactly what came to fruition 20 years later. Who is that young girl? She just announced yesterday they're expecting their second baby. She's married to our health aide, living in a house that was built from state funding for teacher, health professionals, and public safety professionals. And so the model really is working. When I look back at that planning and how it was all focused on what does this need to look like for our youth to be the leaders in, that's the most powerful story that I can think of. They can see so much further, even at that young age.
Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful. I love that, AlexAnna. And then Jamie, if not, we can move forward.
Yeah, again, going back to the Youth and Elders Conference that was mentioned, it is a powerful place. And if everybody, I hope, gets a chance to be able to go and participate. I remember my first time participating and seeing that power of the youth and elders coming together and talking about challenges and coming up with solutions. And I actually happened to be fortunate to be chair of the Youth and Elders Conference my first year that I was able to attend. And I remember there was adults coming in and they wanted to be part of our conversation. We're like, wait a minute, we want to have our conversation first, right? Like, you will have your space. We'll bring the resolutions to you, but let us have this space. You're happy to listen. You're happy, but this is our space to lead. And to see the youth and the elders having that power together and having those conversations, to me, made such a lasting impact. And then taking that, I saw that, unity and action kind of work together, and going over to National Congress of American Indians, where the youth were trying to formulate some kind of permanent youth structure for the organization, because at the time it was only dependent on if the local host would host the youth commission. And so it took us a year and a half. We worked with tribal leaders. We sat down and listened. Our first attempt at making something permanent didn't work. We got voted down, but we continued to work together to find what that solution, what it would look at. And I think we came up with something better in the end with the establishment of the NCI Youth Commission in 1999. Mm-hmm. That I love to see that it's still going strong and that it's still being active. And that was really the youth and the elders and the tribal leaders coming together and figuring out, what can we do for our youth, and how, we don't need to create a new model or create something that another organization is doing. So what is it that the Youth Commission is going to be able to do for our Native youth across the country? And I love being able to go and visit and seeing it, thriving.
Yeah,
I would never imagine.
We need to talk and bring you back into some of the sessions.
I would love to.
That'd be great. The only other thing I was thinking about, in each of our regions, we have language programs that are happening right now that are very intergenerational. Like, I think about the King Island language program up in Nome, and then there's a couple of programs up in Barrow, and those are very focused on this intergenerational learning, and our language embodies all of our values. It embodies concepts that are very different than they are in English. Like, when you're talking about direction in Inupiaq, you can say one word and it shows whether or not the object is 3 times longer than it is wide, whether it's moving or stationary, whether it's behind a barrier, and whether it's up, down, or right here. So Inupiaq and Yupik, I know a little bit about Yupik, and has similar directional language characteristics, and there's just nothing like it. And I feel like those kinds of programs are happening in each one of our regions right now, and it'd be great to for funders to really become familiar with the kind of work that's happening at the village level.
Mm-hmm. It was beautiful hearing this, like mentioned, it best works in practice. It's not, conceptualized of this intergenerational work. It really truly works best in practice. And kind of following along with that, what advice do you have for young organizers who are trying to bring Indigenous knowledge into mainstream decision-making and policy spaces without compromising the integrity of that knowledge?
Well, I'll jump in. I would say you have the strength of your ancestors in you, right? And we say that, but it's true, right? So it's not just words, it really is true. And if you think about that and lean into that, you can feel that power. And in Tlingit, we say, "Goai Kwan," have strength, have courage, and really, lean into your tribal values. Listen well. For us, the listening that we talked about earlier for the funders, it's also for us as individuals when we're sitting in conversation. Don't be sitting on your phone. And I tell people that I, work with, it's, you're not sitting on your phone and you're texting other people while you're having a conversation. Listen to the person you're having a conversation with. Have that respect for them, and then have respect for yourself. The work that you do is heavy, and how whatever that looks like, and give yourself grace and others as well. There's a lot going on in our communities. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of building, but you need to make sure that you're taking time and space for yourself. So if you need to go and sit near the water, or for us, going for a dip, or going out and, make sure you're taking space and take care of yourself, because you are important to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie gave pretty much the advice I wrote for this one, which was to give yourself grace. That's really important, and I'll circle back to that. I was so fortunate my whole life to have all the mentors, and it happened naturally in my village because there was no childcare. So I was stuck with the elders all during all the workday until I could join school. But that always meant I had people mentoring me, and whenever I would run into tension or being accosted for, do you have rights to share what you're sharing, I would go back. And I was fortunate to have elders who really wanted our story shared. And they actually appointed me as the president because they said, with your education, you'll be able to speak to people from the outside. And that's why I take opportunities like this very seriously, because I was put in this position by the elders who said, you go and tell our way of life, tell our stories. So having, and those mentors can be anywhere because we have modern technology now. So it's just a phone call away or a text away. And so all over Indian country, I have wonderful people to turn to. And then now that I've undergone like 12 years of a long language journey, I feel the strength of really knowing who I am today that I didn't have growing up. And so I encourage young people to learn who you are and your history, and to own that. And the more that you learn your language, the less people will even question you, because that when our knowledge is shared in our language, that's when it's safest. And that it is sacred knowledge. So in sharing it, just be intentional because of that, praying for it, how it's being used, and you just do your best, because we do come from communities where there is a lot of lateral violence. And so Yupik have this way of explaining how you protect your mental space, your mental strength, because that's that you can't have that impacted for the work that needs to be done. You can't have that taking your energy.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
I think it's a difficult question because, it's really hard for adults to bring their traditional knowledge into this framework. It sometimes gets twisted around. And I think, everything that AlexAnna said with, we have so much lateral violence in the community, and it's easy to use that frustration against one another. It's much harder to give each other grace and love, and to allow our youth and our people to come forward with their questions and their concerns and their knowledge, their wisdom. One thing that I've learned for myself is to really try to, every time I've sat on a board, I've tried to find a way to ask questions around the wisdom I have before presenting it. Only because if I say it as if it's rule, or if it's something that I think should happen, then I bring my own frustration and my anger, or feelings of the unfairness with me. So the way that I've dealt with that is to really start those conversations by getting a better feel for what's happening in the room by asking questions, and then saying what I want to say, and that seems to help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more understanding than action, before that first step. I really appreciate you guys and your guys' time. We always say "Wesonawe, Degadanoño." Thank you so much. I am grateful for this opportunity. And just really fast, NAP would be upset with me if I didn't mention it. But right now, the Tomorrow Indigenous Fund is now opened, and that was recently curated by the third cohort of the Native Youth Grantmakers. It is now open. And I don't mean to distract or pull away from this conversation, but I believe this is the last time that you guys will see me. So take care, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
Nice meeting you, Madison.
Yeah, Maddie. I always love welcoming our Native Youth Grantmakers into the space, because no matter how many times I welcome them, they are way more eloquent than I ever expect, or even, in comparison to myself. So it's all go, Maddie, for also offering a beautiful transition into, I think, where this conversation is just naturally flowing, of where the critical needs are in specific funding areas. Mm-hmm. We've covered so many different aspects of, the needs for leadership, the needs for really understanding the nuances of the government structures that exist within Alaskan Native communities. I am interested in hearing from each of you, from your experiences in community. What are some of the most critical areas where philanthropic investment is needed right now? If anything pops to mind, I welcome.
Boy, there's.
I was just going to say, kind of going off of what we talked about earlier, right? All very unique. It's going to depend on the community. Even in our region, it's going to maybe depend on the specific village you're working with. But again, going in with a good heart and good intention, knowing that will make a difference and an impact. And I know, in Southeast region, one of the things that I've heard recently are really around like housing, natural resources, and education. So housing, affordable housing, lack of flexible lending initiatives, help with down payments, access to land to build homes, because we talked about the land structure and how we don't have all of that in our communities and have the ownership of that always. And then natural resources, we touched on a lot about that. But again, the land ownership has gone through many hands over the generations. And so us still being here, we're going to and continue to be here as caretakers. And so however we need to partner with to make sure that we're being good stewards and taking care of the land will continue to happen. And then, and I mentioned earlier, education, right? Indigenous knowledge, making sure we're incorporating that in our curriculum, and then making sure our children and all of the children in the state have the access to thrive. So those are the ones I've seen in Southeast, particularly recently.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie, for again reframing that into just what you've experienced through your own community.
One of the things that we've been looking at here at FAI is just the tremendous need across our community. In some of our villages right now, gas is up to $18 a gallon. There's just it's mind-boggling how people are surviving and even thriving in some of our communities. And there's so much. I mean, we have some of the biggest issues across the nation. They say Alaska is the best place to be born because we have the best prematernal care, but it's the worst place to be from 0 to 18 because we have more accident death between 0 to 18 than any other state in the nation. So I feel like we can talk about like almost every area: education, social issues, energy, and we have tremendous and really complex problems in the state. We have a state with basically no budget at this point, and they're really hurting for money. So a lot of our schools have been cut. A lot of our education programs have been cut. The one thing that I think could really help our communities at the family level and individual level is if we could really focus on providing less expensive energy. When you look at Kodiak Island, it's like 100% off the grid. I mean, they were amazing in that they were able to use alternative energy to pull themselves completely out of fossil fuels. Or you look at Greenland, 70% of their energy is based on hydropower, which are the tidal power things like turbines that they're using around the coast of Greenland. And I know, some of our communities have been really exploring that, but oftentimes when people, so we have a fellow who is just wrapping up his time in Juneau, and he said that when people come from urban areas, Native people come from urban areas, their issues are always around identity. They're always around being included and being a part of the conversation. Whereas when people come from our rural areas, the conversation and the expression is always around infrastructure and the tremendous need for people to be able to live their life well. I think it's a combination of both, and I think funding that focus on language and culture and identity, as well as really looking at those basic needs that a lot of our communities are struggling with, is really key to successful funding.
Thank you, Roy. I mean, even the acknowledgement, again, diversity as a strength. There are such a diverse array of needs in the community. It sounds like there's entry points at every level. If a funder is interested in a specific area or across a span, there is need within Alaskan Native communities. AlexAnna, I saw you writing many notes, and so I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
I wanted to first thank Roy for bringing up the fuel, because that really highlights how volatile of lifestyles we have or that we live in. Imagine only one fuel supplier that can come in by air. So you've got to have a runway that's landable. That's not even an option in the spring. If you run out of fuel in your village, your powerhouse shuts down. And literally, you would be lightered in on charters at a time to get this fuel in. That's how it exponentially rises. So Igiugig right now is at $14.37 a gallon for diesel. We're the highest diesel in the Lake and Peninsula borough. That means in order to fill my heating tank, that is one entire month's salary. So, and that doesn't last all year. So, when we got the American Rescue Plan funding from the federal government, that's the first and only time in my role as president of Igiugig since 2008. That was the only time that I saw the federal government even come close to funding the federal trust responsibility. So understanding that federal grants, state grants, they are limited and actually they cost tribes funding to actually run properly. and that we are in a stage of triage. So to ask what the priority is, today it could be fuel because of the cost of fuel and the volatility in even accessing it and delivering it because of our seasonal and climatic conditions. Secondly, it could be something like when they were proposing the largest open pit mine in North America at the headwaters of this large fishing run. Of course, most people would say that's the priority, stopping that extractive industry that's going to destroy our way of life. And so we did. We fought that for 20 years, and then we woke up one day, and all of a sudden it was wildfire. 7,500% increase in wildfire in Bristol Bay, and so suddenly, all of a sudden, these communities had to get wildfire ready. How do you do these big regional projects? So there's regional, and then like Roy mentioned, at the family and individual level, we are really completely ripe for all kinds of funding from any avenue. And I think that's why we're so excited that Native Americans in Philanthropy is having their conference in Alaska. Come up, get to understand what's at play here, and there's room for a lot of help. But I echo all those other priorities that were mentioned, especially housing.
Thank you, AlexAnna. I'm very excited, again, to bring our community into really that relational space of being able to hear on the ground what is needed. But I, in particular, really appreciate you noting the need for not just funding in all of these different areas, but flexible funding. So that ability to change or to address at simultaneously rapid response needs, as well as looking long-term, more sustainable, equally important, but again, could change on a day-to-day basis. So I really appreciate you naming that.
And Shandine, on that topic too, it's not just rural Alaska, because we saw with Typhoon Halong the influx of rural Alaska Natives to the city, and the city not being ready for it. And as we host as we look to bring more audiences up to Alaska, really looking at Anchorage and the urban centers, and encouraging them to make space, because this isn't a unique one-off, oh, we had a typhoon. It's starting to happen regularly, and whole village evacuations could become the norm. And so we need our hubs ready to absorb that. It's at the point of needing a complete coordinated approach to all of it from all levels, tribal, state, federal, so that we aren't like, these are known events that are going to keep happening.
Worse and worse, especially as the effects of climate change impact those that are most vulnerable. So again, yeah, thank you, Alex.
Shandine, a lot of people say it's a choice to live in rural Alaska. And in many ways, yes, it is. But my family will never leave. They'll never leave my village, even if the gas and heating fuel goes up to, double what it is now, which I think is around $8 a gallon for both heating fuel and for gasoline. And the thing that will happen is that they'll stay in our village and they'll suffer. My family could live in a city. They have enough education, they have enough money, but there are many other families who just can't. If you come to Anchorage without money, without a car, without the ability to move into an office job, the potential for becoming a statistic in this town is just huge. And this is not, I don't think it's a very transactional city. It's and trying to change that culture within Anchorage has been, a lifelong goal for a lot of Native organizations and Native leaders who live here. But it's sort of this crossroads for a lot of different kind of people. And I feel like it's not always the best place for our Native people. We're looking at a lot of the folks that came in from Typhoon Halong, and while some of them are surviving and they're making do here, a lot of them are just lost. This is not their home. This is not their land. So finding ways to strengthen our community's infrastructure and support them where they are is a huge an important key to successful funding and project investment in Alaska.
Thank you, Roy. I really want to hone in on this aspect. I know we've talked a lot about the challenges that Alaskan Native communities are facing currently, but I do want to reiterate for all of our audience, again, this inherent strength that also lies within these regions. And I think one in particular is Alaskan Natives' ability to plan for the future in really real practical ways that are sustainable. And I would like to offer to each of you an opportunity to share a little bit more about how you particularly envision Alaska Native leadership shaping the future of philanthropic partnerships in any of these areas, whether it be economic, in community initiatives, or environmental preservation, environmental development. Jamie, maybe if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I have to, when I think about it, I think a true partnership, right? Recognizing our Indigenous knowledge and our solutions that we bring to the table. And, we weren't brought, I wasn't taught like you want to have and gather all these things in this wealth, right? It's not about access. It's about, we don't take more than what we need, and we take care of each other. We're thinking of it as a community and not an individual approach, right? And as a community, and you think about that not even with just the individuals that you live in the community with, but the land and the animals and others that you share that space with. And so one of the earlier lessons for me, I feel like in this kind of don't take more than you need, is the simple going out and berry picking, right? You don't pick a whole bush through, you go through and you move around and you leave some for the bears, you leave some for others, you leave some for the next season. And so that's why we're thinking, for the community and also for the future generations there. And that can apply to so many different things, our fishing, our land use, our, harvesting. And for those that don't live in that lifestyle, another good example that was recent was during COVID. Think about the raids we had on toilet paper and the hoarding of toilet paper, right? Like that's not our tribal values, right? That's not our values. That's not taking care of our community. Why do people need to be having storage rooms full of toilet paper when others didn't have any and couldn't get it? So I think just making sure we're taking care of each other and thinking of it as a community, right? And that's the way I would love to see it continue to move on, is continue to move from the individual to the community approach and looking at and helping to support others.
Thank you, Jamie. And it's so important to name that method of thinking, leaving some behind for the community, is still in line with thinking in abundance. It's not that scarcity mindset. It is sharing the wealth, whether it be monetary, whether it be resources, whether it be knowledge. So I appreciate you sharing that. AlexAnna, Roy, if you would like to uplift any other types of ways that you think Alaskan Native leadership may change philanthropic partnerships in the future.
Yeah, I think data is such an important element that is missing from a lot of our information. Like anecdotally, we can talk about the cost of fuel, and we can talk about the impact it's going to have, or if we lost the bypass mail, that we have, or if we lost ferry service, but we don't actually have good data on so much of the problems that we're trying to solve. So, there are regional organizations that are really gathering data and trying to do that sort of regional and community assessment. I think, paying attention to those, funding them, making sure that we're supporting that really important information and understanding how the impact of any one of these systems failing is going to have on our villages is really key.
I'm so glad Roy brought up data, because that's a point that I really wanted to hone in on. That's what I noticed as a tribal administrator trying to put grant applications in for airport extensions or just basic infrastructure, is that there is no data to support it, and you don't have the population, and then it becomes very much, what is the point? And they overlook the fact that we are a world-class fishing destination for America's wealthy. And that we do, that we see the value of being in our homelands, as well as all of these communities are stewarding incredible biodiversity. And that's why we need our people in these communities for the stewardship factor alone. What I'm really excited about right now is the high level of Alaska Native leaders joining in political races at regional, state, and federal levels. And right now we're in a really exciting climate in Alaska. We will be getting a new governor. We have Mary Peltola running for senator. We have Bill Hill, he's a Dinna Athabaskan from Lake Iliamna, my own home region, running for Congress. The whole state of Alaska only has one congressman, so you could see the main message and hope that I want to give to the people listening into our conversation today. In Alaska, you have the full recognition of the power of one. And today you have three of us leaders, but imagine I have 99 years of board experience. I've served on school boards, borough planning commissions, tribes, corporations. I'm the regional health board chair. We come at the local level, you have communities full of experts. And all it takes is this understanding. And so for that, I really want to thank Native Americans in philanthropy, and also First Alaskans, and also Alaska Venture Fund, and all of our foundations working together to bring more philanthropy to Alaska so that we can demystify this state and celebrate this diversity we're working to preserve on all levels. But really going back to that power of one, if you could develop trust with one, you will find a welcome into that community. You will find an inroad into that community, and you will find long-term, people are not moving around. Like, we're stable governance. Our tribes have historically adopted 20-year working plans. Most organizations are like, that's not even practical for America. No, that's our status quo. That's the drumbeat that we march to, is a 20-year, that's a generational impact that we're able to make. So I'm excited to see the organizations that are assisting our own leadership, our own Native population to run for office, to get out the Native vote, to actually, as shareholders, state the vision that we want to be seeing for that land where we're living, instead of letting things come top down. The real answer for sustainable Alaska is really from the ground up, and it's with our youth.
Yeah.
Beautifully put, AlexAnna. Jamie, if you'd like to follow, if there are any other aspects that you feel like Alaska Native communities are going to inevitably influence philanthropic partnerships in the future.
Well, I agree with the Native vote, right? As being somebody who, I'm a descendant of Elizabeth Pradovich. So if those that don't know her, read about her, learn about her, our power of getting out the vote, our power of organizing and coming together when we find challenges. I seen it in action. I've seen it, like I mentioned, at the Youth and Elders. I've seen it at NCAI. And I just think that is where, we need to continue to work together. I think we're stronger together because, going back to the data, we don't have the numbers, right? And so becomes a challenge for us. And it becomes a challenge. And when you look at, you're writing those grant applications and you're trying to serve a smaller group of 10, but man, how powerful are those 10 people? And when they grow up and what they continue to do, and if we invest in them, that ripple of change that we talk about, right, in philanthropy, like that, it happens, and you can see it in Alaska. So I agree with what AlexAnna said. I'm excited to see where this goes next, and I'm excited to have everybody in Alaska. I can't wait to have them welcome everybody here and bring them out into our communities.
I, again, could not have said it better myself. I think all of our community members are also excited to get to know your communities better and in person. I just want to, again, there's so much gratitude in this space today, but I want to offer a thanks for everyone for, again, sharing your time, your experience, your truly you in this space. And as we look to close out this conversation, I really want to give you the closing word here, recognizing Native Americans and philanthropy has a very broad audience that typically spans the entire public sector and beyond. I am opening the floor from funders and Native nonprofits to elected officials to our budding youth, future leaders, our Native youth. What is something that they can do today, and what's your closing call to action for them? And AlexAnna, I'll pass it to you first.
Well, I would say follow your heart. That's what I've done with my life, is just follow my heart. And the work that I do is the most fulfilling work out there. But we really started with a weather analogy. And because a lot of times when people hear philanthropy, they think about the money. And I really think about the relationships, because help can come in many shapes and forms. And oftentimes, the relationships are more powerful than the funding. And so I thought, how do you explain this to someone who's newer to philanthropy, or even to like my own community? And the way I really see it is, weather controls our way of life where we live still to this day. And that's why it's exciting to bring visitors out to our village. There's not a lot of places where everything is dictated by the seasons and the weather. And you can have everything. You can have a nice airplane. You could have the finest pilot. You could be ready to go. But if it's foggy out and completely fogged in, you cannot leave. So you're on hold. So you wait and wait and wait. Sometimes your plane doesn't actually leave until the next day or the next day. Sometimes it cancels completely. The power of philanthropy has the power to lift that fog immediately. And so that's what I think about various stages of our projects, and all the needs that we have in Alaska. You can really feel empowered when you think about private philanthropy has the power to change the climate in which we're operating. So fundamentally, our plans are in motion. We're going to get there when we get there. We're going to take the hard road. But at the end of the day, we want to remain ready for the moment that philanthropy shows up. It's a way of always getting ready in our Yupik way, that word, always being prepared. We've taken that, which comes from our subsistence way of life, into our operations as a tribal government, always ready. You don't know who's going to come by your community. You don't know who's going to hear your story. And we believe in that story can change the trajectory of things. So just follow your heart.
Yeah, AlexAnna, thank you so much. Jamie, Roy, I open the floor to you as well to close out your specific call to action to our audience today.
Jamie, why don't you let me go so you can wrap us all up?
Oh, great.
I was thinking about what AlexAnna said, and leveraging those relationships, lean into those of us who are so well networked across Alaska. As you come, we love hosting people. If you want, we've flown people out to Dillingham. We've flown funders out to Dillingham just to have them learn about the region and about the challenges and the work that's happening that's so good, that is important to fund and to support. That really is a game changer for the region. And I think that building those relationships that are also mentorships. There's so many people in Alaska who have big hearts and so much wisdom about the work that we're doing here. Leaning into those relationships, learning from them, and then making an investment that is building that relationship commitment within our community here, I think, is really critical. Thank you.
Yeah, Roy. Jamie?
So I agree, the relationships, right? And it isn't always just money transactional that was talked about earlier. I think when, we all care so deeply about our land and our communities. And that relationship also means a relationship with each other and the relationship with the land and the animals and the fish and everything that's around us. And so come with us and help support us in this work. As we all know, there's a lot of things against us right now. We talked about the weather, we talked about the administration, different things that come up against us. There are complex structures that we have, but we can make a difference, and we are seeing differences in things being made and using our Indigenous knowledge. But sometimes it may not be money we need. Sometimes it may be a contact, somebody to come in and help us think through something that we are struggling to try to figure out. How do we do this? How do we move this forward? And the examples that we can bring in from, like, as Roy shared, this is what they're doing in Greenland. This is what they're doing in Kodiak. I'm taking notes. I'm like, this is really great to know these things. So there are tons of ways that we can help support each other. And just going back to the respect for each other and the coming in with a good heart, then, I don't see where we can go wrong.
Yeah, Nitsago, one more time, again and again, thank you so much to each of you for opening up your communities and your experiences with our people today. I am so honored to share this space with you. And I cannot wait to see, where our future collaborations will take us. There's a lot of excitement, I think, in just being able to be in the same room together, whether it's physical or virtual. So I truly appreciate all of your time today, to each of you. In closing, I just want to also extend that same gratitude to all of our audience members, whether you're a member of Native Americans in Philanthropy or simply someone who wants to gain a deeper understanding and relationship with Alaskan Native peoples. There is a place for you here, and I hope that you feel like you have gotten a little bit of a deeper understanding of these incredible community initiatives that are happening on the ground. If you registered for this member education session, you will receive a follow-up email that provides even more opportunities to get involved and deepen your understandings even more. Including some that were shared from the Alaskan Federation of Natives, which was mentioned in our conversation before. So this is, I hope everyone understands, an entry point. We cannot cover everything in an hour and a half. So I really encourage those who are interested to further your education and just get involved wherever you can. To our speaker's point, follow your heart. And go in a good way, and you'll get connected to incredible people. So we truly appreciate your continued support in all of Native Americans in Philanthropy's programming, and in particular, of course, for your support for these kinds of spaces, these virtual member education sessions. Just as a small reminder, these sessions are open to the public as a highlight of our member benefits. NAP membership is open to Indigenous relatives as well as non-Indigenous allies. If you're not a member yet and want to learn more about the process, you're welcome to visit our newly redesigned website, nativephilanthropy.org, or email us directly at membership@nativephilanthropy.org. Lastly, again, all registered attendees will receive an email that also includes a link to a short survey. If you can, please take a few moments to share your opinions and what you'd like this session series to look like in the future. It should take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete and is the only direction that NAP takes in planning all of these education resources. So your feedback is truly invaluable. If you are a member of NAP, I am excited to welcome you to our second member exclusive content offering next month. In this space, we extend an invitation to all current NAP members to deepen their understandings of key philanthropic initiatives, tools. In this particular session, we welcome anyone who has ever heard the term donor advised funds or DAFs and wondered what it actually meant for you, for your organization. We invite you to join us for our member exclusive content, Demystifying Donor Advised Funds. They represent nearly 50% of all charitable giving in the US and have become an increasingly popular method for both donors and philanthropic organizations alike to establish these types of flexible and sustainable funding. While we acknowledge they're rooted in Western wealth preservation practices, DAFs have also evolved into one of today's most widely used philanthropic vehicles and holds very strong potential for culturally responsive, respectful, and relational support for our Native organizations. So I strongly encourage you to join us on June 18th for an exciting workshop that will be presented in collaboration with the Santa Fe Community Foundation. Again, if you're not a member yet, or if you just have questions, please feel free to email membership@nativephilanthropy.org or visit our website. Until the next time, thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Ahehe.